An ongoing fight for justice, Taiwan marks Indigenous Peoples Day. China's restrictions on essential metals for chips go into effect. Flight attendants call for gender equality outside Taiwan's government watchdog. Plus,
I'm Rik Glauert for TaiwanPlus here on Orchid Island off the southeast coast of Taiwan. I've got a report for you on how, despite decades of activism from the local population, Taiwan is still storing its radioactive nuclear waste here.
hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Rik Glauert. Taiwan's president is championing progress made on indigenous rights as the country marks Indigenous Peoples Day. Rik Glauert reports.
It's Indigenous Peoples Day in Taiwan, and for the first time the country's president is holding her annual meeting with community leaders outside of the capital Taipei. She's gone to the south, where most of Taiwan's indigenous people live.
在等一下的会议中，仪将主委也会详细的说明这几年来政府推动原住民族转型正义跟历史正义的各项成果，包括在长照资源方面的进步，在语言文化复振上的进步，都是有目共睹。
Improving the lives of Taiwan's indigenous population has become a hallmark of Tsai's presidency. Just after coming to power in 2016, she formally apologized for rights abuses, armed attacks, and land seizures going back over 400 years, when the Han Chinese first migrated to Taiwan. During Tsai's term, Taiwan has also officially recognized indigenous languages, introduced protected indigenous seats in legislatures, and increased compensation for past injustices. But the country's nearly 600,000 indigenous people still face discrimination in education and work, higher unemployment, and lower standards of living than the rest of the population. Many indigenous people feel the government's policy changes have yet to make a difference in communities.
A lot of issues or indigenous rights is already being legalized, but the implementation is always the issues. So I would say the indigenous people's right in Taiwan still remain more on law on paper rather than law in action.
It's been 29 years since Taiwan officially recognized its original inhabitants. For indigenous people, it was a crucial step toward equality, a necessary journey that many feel is far from over. Justin Wu and Rik Glauert for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan and Somaliland have signed their first bilateral deal, strengthening trade and business links. Taiwan's economics minister, Wang Meihua, says both sides have much to gain from this MOU, noting potential in Somaliland's fishing and mining industries. This new agreement was signed by Somaliland's Commerce Minister, Mohammed Hassan Saad, who was on a 5-day trip to Taiwan. For more on this, TaiwanPlus reporter Louise Watt spoke to Raymond Song, Vice President of the Prospect Foundation, a Taiwan think tank.
A delegation from Somaliland is visiting Taiwan. Why do Somaliland and Taiwan want to deepen relations?
In geopolitical terms, that's, I think both parties are crucial for each other. Firstly, they are both unrecognized states in the international community. Of course, Taiwan has really double-digit allies to maintain formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and also Somaliland is also an unrecognized state. Besides that, in African continent, Taiwan has only one diplomatic ally left, which is Eswatini. And of course, PRC, China has also doing extensive work to getting allies in Africa continent. So Somaliland is the second foothold for Taiwan, and Somaliland occupied the key strategic position in the Horn of Africa and also in Gulf of Aden. And that area nearby, in Djibouti, China has a naval base there. So strategically, Taiwan can maintain this friendly relations with Somaliland, and also to try to balance China's influence in East Africa a bit. And that's also to the geopolitical advantage of Taiwan's ally, including the United States. So establishing the representative relationship between Taiwan and Somaliland, as we heard, has been endorsed and helped by the United States.
What kind of trade is Taiwan looking to do with Somaliland?
This time we see a trade representatives delegation coming to Taiwan to sign an MOU to deepen the bilateral cooperations on trade promotion and also on mining and also on exploration of oil and gas. And that was to the mutual benefit of Taiwan and Somaliland because a new block has recently been found to have oil stocks in underground. And for a less developed country like Somaliland, they really need the technology and funding to facilitate exploration of this feasibility of the extraction of oil. So Taiwan could provide the technology and funding necessary to make that happen. And for Taiwan, of course, Taiwan is need to have more multiply their sources of energy.
That was Raymond Song, Vice President of the Prospect Foundation, speaking with Louise Watt. The price of new houses in 100 Chinese cities fell slightly last month, while factory activity also slowed. This new data from 2 private surveys is more evidence of trouble facing China's economy. Tuesday's figures back up official numbers released by Beijing on Monday. They show sluggish manufacturing activity and a slowdown in construction. Investors were expecting China to announce stimulus measures, but the government gave only vague promises of support. China is the world's second largest economy, but is suffering from weak demand at home and abroad. Meanwhile, Beijing has started enforcing export restrictions on 2 rare but vital metals. That's causing concern for some chip makers who need those to make semiconductors. Joyce Tseng reports.
China's latest hand in a tech war with the U.S. has taken effect. Starting August 1st, special licenses are needed to buy the country's gallium and germanium, 2 rare metals whose compounds are used in everything from smartphones to space electronics. Gallium is used in a variety of digital hardware, such as cell phones and electric vehicles. Germanium is used in products like optical fibers and infrared camera lenses. China produces 60% of the world's germanium and 80% of the world's gallium, which makes Beijing's controls a clear shot at Western economies.
This is one of the main cards I would have expected them to play. It's demonstrating Beijing's ability and the leverage that it has here, that it has a strong hand.
Beijing's restrictions are causing the most concern in the semiconductor industry. Both gallium and germanium are essential for making the chips that power practically all electronic devices. And some chip companies are already feeling the effects.
I think a lot of the customers are basically in Japan. These are the huge companies who make like the gallium compound wafers. So for them, it's quite vital, right? But again, some of these applications are also very vital for China.
China is in a precarious position when it comes to semiconductors. The U.S. and China are in a fight for global tech supremacy. But experts say Beijing is years behind in fully making their own advanced chips. And U.S. President Joe Biden's CHIPS Act, enacted a year ago, was a deliberate move to bring semiconductor production home and break China's grip on the manufacturing supply chain. While gallium and germanium are important, Beijing's latest countermeasure won't go as far as to disrupt Western chip production. In fact, some producers are already finding other ways to get what they need.
People are finding out, how to, I would say, harvest it or how to basically get this product out. One opportunity is also like recycling.
But some industry leaders have called on Washington to avoid further restrictions that may hurt domestic and allied businesses. They fear further moves to squeeze Chinese tech could lead to export bans for other, more irreplaceable minerals, like lithium used in batteries and green technologies.
This is just a good time for us to think about, think more broadly about China's influence on some of these supply chains and think about how much we're willing to accept that.
It'll take a couple of months to see the full effects of Beijing's restrictions. But what's already clear is that chipmakers will need to innovate not just in their tech. Now they need to get creative about the materials they use and where to get them. Patrick Chen and Joyce Tseng for TaiwanPlus.
China has appointed a new head of its rocket force, but it's someone with no previous experience in that branch of the military. To find out more about this new appointment, Sam Hui spoke to Ling Ying-yo, an assistant professor at Tamkang University's Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies.
Why China has a rocket forces? Why is it important?
俄罗斯它过去有叫战略火箭军，所以其实它是把飞弹部队独立出来。那顺便跟大家介绍一下，在火箭军的话，它其实最重要的任务就是做核子威慑 （nuclear weapon）， 所以它有早期不管是东风5型飞弹，还是现在的东风31、东风41，那它也有比较中程的，类似像东风21、东风26，它可能就会打击像关岛啦，或者是它希望能够去对付在移动中的美国的航空母舰。那不管是在1996年的飞弹危机，或者是在2022年当时解放军对台湾的一个军演，都有去运用到这个早期的第二炮兵跟现在的一个火箭军使用的弹道飞弹。
Wang Houbin, he was the deputy commander of PLA Navy, so is the appointment of him to become China's new commander of rocket forces shows any further cooperation between PLA Navy and rocket forces on the battlefield?
我觉得这一点其实是机会是并不大的，因为你说要联合作战的话，其实你应该要去找一个是核子潜舰出身的，拥有发射这种我们讲核子弹道飞弹潜舰，它有具有2次核打击的实力，就我们所谓的 SSBN。但是王后兵他并不是 SSBN 出来的，他是水面舰出来的，所以等于说他对核子武器其实是一个门外汉。
Is there any similarity between the appointment of Wang Houbin to be the new commander of China's rocket forces and the replacement of Wang Yi to be China's new foreign minister?
这一次不管是外交体系的秦刚，还是他这一次火箭军人事的调换，呈现出来最大的状况就是在20大后，理论上习近平应该是统一了全部的一个内部的政治的一个势力，但是从这些事情看来，他不是统一，反而是血洗的刚开始。
That was Ling Ying-yo, assistant professor of Tamkang University's Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies, speaking to our reporter Sam Hui. Myanmar's deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been pardoned on 5 of her 19 convictions, but she still faces decades in prison. The Nobel laureate and democracy icon was jailed in 2021 after the military seized power in a coup. Tuesday's pardon reduces the 78-year-old sentence from 33 years to 27. Myanmar's former president, Win Myint, also had his sentence reduced. Coming up, we visit a Taiwanese vocalist training her students in Bangkok to be world-class opera singers. Stay tuned.
We bring you stories from Taiwan.
Every day of the week.
Our reporters travel the nation.
Exploring the issues that matter to you.
News from here in Taiwan and around the world.
What's up, Taiwan? Weekdays on TaiwanPlus. Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top stories. Taiwan's president has championed progress made on indigenous rights as the country marks Indigenous Peoples Day. And as Taiwan marks the occasion, Sally Jensen looks at Indigenous peoples' response to the oil industry in the heart of the Amazon rainforest.
An ancestral war song being sung to keep environmental activists out of indigenous Warani territories. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, these communities have spent 10 years living alongside oil extraction plants. This industrial activity destroys the land, but it generates an income and it makes up for the absence of social services in these indigenous communities.
Si no hubiese la industria petrolera, nosotros no hubiéramos experimentado, o sea, no hubiéramos tenido educación, salud, bienestar familiar.
These petroleum plants are in Ecuador's protected Yasuni National Park, part of one of the most biodiverse reserves on the planet. That's why environmental groups want to stop the activities of the oil industry here. They've organized a referendum with that aim, set to take place this month.
Es salvar el lugar más biodiverso del planeta, que es territorio de pueblos indígenas en aislamiento, que no se están beneficiando de ninguna manera de estas actividades extractivas, sino que lo que dice la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos es que se les están vulnerando sus derechos.
The indigenous people have sovereignty over their territory in this region, but the Ecuadorian state has the final say on the soil.
Hay 7,000 barriles el día de hoy. Y es por ese monto genera más o menos unos 1.200 millones netos al año para el Estado.
It's hoped that the referendum will put an end to tensions in the region. But while some indigenous peoples are in favor of the oil industry, others acknowledge that it is putting their existence and that of the planet at threat.
Genocida! Ecocida!
Porque dentro dos nossos territórios está 82% da biodiversidade viva no mundo. Então, se nossos modos de vida estão em risco, o planeta também está em risco.
Understanding the climate and ecological impacts, countries around the world are trying to move away from their reliance on oil and other fossil fuels. But if the Guarani are left behind in the transition, they may be singing their war song for some time to come. Andy Scher and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
For more than 4 decades, Taiwan has stored nuclear waste on its outlying Orchid Island. And as Rik Glauert reports, it's spurred years of protests from local residents.
When 50-year-old Sinan Jipengaya opened her bar on a quiet part of Taiwan's idyllic Orchid Island, she didn't just want to serve cocktails to the tourists drawn to the island's tropical beaches. She opened her bar with a message to her guests.
我的酒吧叫反核吧，那主要的目的呢，就是我们希望可以传播给不单单是当地人，我们也希望来的台湾人，甚至是其他国家的人都可以知道，我们正在努力这件事情。我们是希望可以把核废料迁出去。
Jipengaya's island lies 60 kilometers off Taiwan's southeastern coast. Also known as Lanyu, it's home to less than 5,000 people. Most of them are indigenous Dawul, like Jipengaya. But this is also where the country stored discharge from its nuclear power stations on the main island. More than 100,000 barrels of radioactive nuclear waste are stored here on the southernmost tip of the island. It was placed here by the government 4 decades ago, without the consent or even the knowledge of the local population. It's pitted an indigenous minority on a small remote island prone to earthquakes and typhoons against the central government, and prompted decades of protests from locals over health risks from contamination. 4 years ago, authorities handed over more than $83 million in compensation and promised another $7 million every 3 years while the waste remains there. The money has blunted widespread protests on Orchid Island, but some activists believe it hasn't solved the problems.
我觉得对我们来讲，就会觉得现在很多癌症的发生，很多疾病的发生，就大家都归咎于整个核废料的问题。可是我们却不知道说到底是不是核废料的问题。
There are also growing concerns that as climate change prompts more extreme weather, the safety of the site could be at greater risk. On their website, Taiwan's state-owned electric company, which operates the storage facility, says it is secure enough to withstand earthquakes and typhoons, and that the waste has not impacted the health of locals. Nuclear power is still a contentious issue in Taiwan. Opposing candidates in the upcoming presidential elections disagree on whether to continue with the country's plan to go nuclear-free by 2025. But for people on Orchid Island, the lasting impact of the industry should not be laying at their door, regardless of how much compensation they are offered.
你们都领了，那干嘛还要反？所以我就会反问他说：“我们领啦，那个钱你要吗？如果你要，我给你核废料放你家，你要吗？”
Orchid Island is riding a tourism boom. Hotels and bars are opening at an unprecedented rate. As visitors dive into the crystal waters next to the nuclear waste dump, Swimming with tropical fish and sea turtles, many seem unaware of the uncertain future and unresolved issues facing the local population, caused by what's stored under the warehouses on the shore. Devin Tsai and Rik Glauert on Orchid Island for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan unveiled its new Ministry of Agriculture on Tuesday. That's an upgrade of the former Council of Agriculture established way back in 1984. Calls for an agriculture ministry have first started 35 years ago with a movement led by the country's farmers. But it wasn't until May this year that the legislature passed a new law to officially establish one. Under the ministry, there will be 2 new agencies dedicated to sustainable development and to animal protection. The government says the top goals are to increase farmers' incomes and to ensure food security, especially in the face of the climate crisis.
台湾目前的农产品的自给率是30%几而已。如果未来气候变迁的挑战持续加大，我们没有办法顺利从世界各地购买到我们所必需的农产品的时候，对台湾是一个挑战。所以我们必须要未雨绸缪。
Women in Taiwan earn less than 2/3 of what men do. That's according to the latest government figures. The statistics show the average income for men in 2021 was around $25,000. That's 37% more than the average income for women in that same year, which was about $16,000. These numbers are difficult to compare internationally because most countries measure the pay gap differently. But the Labor Ministry says that the hourly wage gap is smaller in Taiwan than it is in the US, South Korea, and Japan. Meanwhile, flight attendants rallied outside Taiwan's government watchdog HQ to call for gender equality within the airline industry. Bing Wang was there.
On the back against expanded legal protections against sexual harassment in the workplace, Taiwanese flight attendants are calling for officials to take a deeper look at the airline industry. Flight attendants say men and women are treated differently by employers and are pushing for gender equality. One of the issues they're protesting is rules within the industry that say women must wear skirts and makeup. They say this is gender discrimination.
今天的诉求就是希望国家人权委员会可以做出，国际的航空公司如果让女性呢只能穿裙装上班的话，是一个性别歧视的行为。
The Flight Attendants Union is also asking for higher wages and more days off. Many say they make a little more than minimum wage and that labor practices in the industry need improvement.
例如说，怀孕，然后或是育婴留停，其实都会影响到加薪以及升迁。那包含我们这些外观上的，可能需要穿着裙装啊，然后丝袜、高跟鞋，其实这些都非常不利于我们实务上在工作上面的安全。
The union says that inequality has led to harassment by passengers and employers. Taiwan is currently going through its biggest wave in the Me Too movement. Hundreds of people are speaking out against abuse, and it started a fierce debate across Taiwanese society. The flood of public response has made the government make swift action on these issues. Aside from expanding the definition of what sexual harassment is, they're also calling for harsher punishments against offenders. And that's what these workers are calling for today. Scott Huang and Bing Wang in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Fans of Western classical opera here in East Asia don't need to travel to La Scala in Italy to get their fix. They can go to Thailand instead. Our reporter Joyce Tseng meets a Taiwan-born opera singer who's been coaching talent in Bangkok to become world-class vocalists.
Hearing this, you'd think you're in Vienna or Milan. But these singers are in fact in Bangkok, Thailand, at Heavenly Voice Nancy's studio, run by Taiwanese-born American vocalist Nancy Ping Wei. She's been teaching classical voice for almost 30 years at one of Asia's premier music schools, Mahidol's College of Music, about an hour from Thailand's capital. Her students have gone on to perform in Austria, Japan, France, the US, and Italy, just to name a few places. Nancy was born and raised in Taiwan's central Nantou County, at a time she says when classical music wasn't super popular.
I grew up in central Taiwan, and during that time, it's in school, if you ask around, not many really study pursuing in classical music. I learned singing from my father, in the car, every driving trip, we was singing through from the first minute until we arrived at destination.
After completing her bachelor's and master's degrees in the US, Nancy moved to Thailand with her husband. That's where she found her calling, teaching classical voice.
This responsibility suddenly hit me. I have to do well. Many young singers are in my hand.
Nancy also came to realize that the Thai language actually gave her students a special advantage in learning classical Western opera.
The vowels can go above the letters, below, on the right, on the left. And so this interesting sound of Thai language make it very easy to teach German, French, Italian, English.
Nancy's protégés, like these university students, hope to perform on stages around the world one day, and perhaps even teach students of their own. And nothing would make Nancy prouder than to see her students achieving their dreams and sharing their heavenly voices. Alex Chen and Joyce Tseng in Bangkok for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, we leave you with images of Venice. On Monday, UNESCO recommended that the Italian city be added to its list of threatened World Heritage Sites. I'm Rik Glauert. Take care and see you next time.